That explains to you and me why there have been two major scrambles for Africa over the last 400 or 500 years. It's so obvious. This is where resources are abundant. And as long as who controls Africa will control the world, because they can extract these raw materials for very little and continue to build their own manufacturing sectors. But colonization was the first scramble for Africa. And what it did for Africa was simply, I'm not even winching about it, I'm just explaining to you that today the consequence is just easy to, through all sorts of measures, from trade to individual relations between former colonial masters and independent African governments, to manipulate Africa so that it doesn't manufacture, continues to supply raw material. This second, well, let me be more crude. First World War and Second World War, people say it was the Germans fighting its fellow European partners. It was the Germans fighting its fellow European partners so that they can figure out who is going to control Africa. So it was still about Africa. But this third phase is more benign because it makes it look like it's a fair game. It's all about trade. And so it's not. Africa still does not manufacture. Africa continues to be a source of cheap raw materials. And Africa continues to import finished products, from toothpicks to dog biscuits. I mean, what kind of an African century is this, that we walk into the next economic superpower and we still import toothpicks? So the third scramble is the one Africa can win easily and will win easily. And we, the older generation, have done the best we can. We have failed the younger generation. If the younger generation is to follow just 20% of what I'm going to say from now on, Africa will be the next economic superpower after China, after the United States. That's why I'm concerned that we should not be the next economic superpower by walking into it. We have to consciously know that's what we are going to do, and we're going to do it. Next slide, please. So, what does this mean for Africa moving forward? Actually, in summary, we need a 50 to 100-year plan for every country in the world, not just for China and the United States. Oh, China has a 50 to 100-year plan for every country on the African continent. So does the United States. We don't even have one plan for China, and no single African country has a plan for China or the United States. So first stage, as a one Africa, we don't have to have the same political boundaries across the 55 countries. We just need the same economic policy and the same foreign policy. And off we go. We can ensure that we develop a 50-year plan for every country in the world, and we'll accelerate how we trade with them, how we exchange technologies with them, how we fund our programs, and ensure that they can lap and love African culture, because believe it or not, they love our culture. They love our sense of everything, from fashion to cuisine but we haven't translated it to commercial output. And the young people, that's what you have to do. Next slide, please. So the current situation is that 55 African countries, each one of the 55 is in a middle income trap, meaning we have unorthodox structural transformation. Why? Because there is massive accelerating urbanization, but without manufacturing jobs. When you have masses of people migrating from rural to urban, but there are no manufacturing jobs in the city, it's just services. People are just going there for services because there's a better mobile, networks for your phone. There's more medicine in the clinics and so on. But to get out of the middle income trap requires us, first and foremost, to deal with the primary production connected straight to manufacturing. Next slide, please. And I'll go into that and show where the young people come in. We need to ensure that there are massive policy changes across the countries. And when we talk about policy change, I know young people, you say, we're excluded, we're not involved. Well, I am proposing, and I'll go into it in more detail, that young people, you should have the boldness to go straight into public service. Why should you try to influence the world from the sidelines? All you think about is making money from businesses. Well, it's not going to happen until you go into the public service, until you influence policy directly, until you drive public service systems that understand business, private service systems that understand how to build industries. If you don't do it, young people, expect people who have never done it to do it for you in public service as you hang around trying to go into innovation hubs. Tough luck. You have to change your mind very quickly. Next slide, please. What's this one saying? Okay, opportunities for growth. Actually, I want to go, next slide. I want to go into the table that shows us where all the major opportunities are. But before we go into that, I want to explain to you what industrialization is. Most people think industrialization just means building factories and producing finished products. No, industrialization is actually a major transformation of society at large. It's a mindset change, making it possible for everyone. It doesn't matter they're in the rural village or they're in the township or they're in a small town. The mindset is to change. So that is about mass production of raw material and being able to organizedly, in an organized fashion, aggregate products. I mean, don't grow anything which you don't know where it's going to end up in terms of manufacturing. Don't just produce stuff to sell at Mbaromsika. It must be targeted for manufacturing, starting with manufacturing right in the village and the township and the small towns. That's why we need to build, young people have to have capacity for aggregating products and providing the agro-logistics to make sure it's in the right quality and time for manufacturing. So mass production leads to mass processing, and mass processing starts in the village and townships. That's how the Chinese did it. That's how the South Koreans did it. That's how the Vietnamese are doing it now. Don't think about manufacturing only happens in the big towns. It starts in the village and the township and the small towns. So when we say mass production and mass processing, I'm talking about converting all the small towns and growth points into manufacturing centers, not administrative centers. In the case of Zimbabwe, Marondera, Chinoi, Masingo, these for young people must not continue to be administrative centers. They must be converted into serious manufacturing centers. Mass consumption means consuming your own finished products. Don't produce things for export to start with. We must produce and mass process so that we can mass consume within a short distance. All these three processes must happen within 25 to 50 kilometers. Don't produce maize or soybeans and then send it all the way to Harare for processing 200 kilometers and send the maize back another 200 kilometers for consumption. No, that's not industrialization. When you eat food that has traveled 600 kilometers, for what? You must process the food right there in the township, in the growth point. Finished. All these snack foods are nice, people will want them, but listen, don't produce that stuff in the big city. In the big city should be serious industries only. The small time textile products, leatherware, packaging, herbs, and producing a lot of the snack foods should happen in villages and townships. Next slide.